I think it would be good if you started today, Alicia, with a few
Okay,
ground rules.
sure. So just a reminder for those who haven't been on a Zoom call before, we just ask that you keep your microphone muted while our presenters are talking, and that way Zoom doesn't accidentally pick up sound from your living room and share that instead of what the presenter is saying. So if you notice in the background that your microphone goes red, that's probably because I'm watching in the background and making sure that microphones are muted where they're supposed to be. But we want to welcome you to have conversations in the chat window while the presenters are talking. And if you have a question, we'll have a time for Q&A after we close, and you can hang on and get an answer to that question then, and I'll make sure that we keep track of those questions and that we'll get them answered. But then at the end, of course, during the Q&A, you can unmute and ask your question then as well. But in the meantime, I will go check out the behind the scenes of the Zoom call and pass it back to Doug.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Why don't I pray us in, and then we'll get going. Father, boy, it's just great to be together as one, as your church. We thank you for being in this room with us. We just thank you for allowing us to partner with you to reach those that you love and care for, the least of these behind prison and jail walls. Bless this conversation that we have. May it reflect you. And we just give this next hour to you in your name, in your most heavenly name. Amen. All right. Thank you. I'm going to see if I can change this a little bit. There. I don't like looking at myself when I'm so big in the screen. Well, first, I'm going to have to start with, I guess, somewhat of an apology, because I think in fact, I know we sent out a confusing message with the times for these Zoom calls. We had it on our schedule that there were 8 last night and 3 this afternoon. We sent out a reminder email to all of you stating that, and then just before that 3 o'clock hour, I'm starting to get emails saying that they're confused because in the just fermenters they received, those numbers were flipped. And it was like, oh no. So what do we do with that? So we jumped on that 3 o'clock hour and just wondering if anybody showed up. And sure enough, there was a group that was in there waiting for us to show up. And we weren't prepared at all for a presentation or anything, but it was a great conversation. I don't know if any of you were in there, but it just turned out to be just a blessing to me. I know that. So, and I know some of them came anyway at night. So we didn't make anybody too mad yesterday. I'll jump on the Zoom tonight at 8 o'clock just to see if anybody's in the room, just to make an apology and have a discussion. So again, we just apologize for the confusion. The interesting thing is there were probably 5 eyes on this, and we all missed it. So we try not to do that. So okay. I'll give you a couple updates. I want to give you a couple updates in the office. You know, during this pandemic season, there's been dramatic change for all of our lives. And as we've been talking, that includes our ministry. And Bernice is going to talk about that in a couple minutes. But through that, you know, our office, as you can see, I'm in the downstairs of my home. And you know, there are a number of us at the office that have not been in the office for a very long time. And so we are running at a pretty skeleton staff within the office. But now we are just beginning now to start to transition in a few at a time. And so we just want to do that wisely and not too quickly. And so I don't know exactly what that plan is. I think they're still, you know, the leadership team is still trying to hone in on what that's going to look like, but just be assured we're starting to transition back in. So today we have Bernice from our operations department is going to be speaking today. Our goal over the past number of Zoom calls that we've had with you has been to introduce you to different aspects of the ministry. that you are a part of. And so this is the final department. So it's last but not least for Bernice, the final department that's very close to what you do. And from here, then we're going to take a different turn with these Zoom calls. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that after Bernice. I'm looking forward to a new season, and I want your input on it. So we'll talk about that towards the end. So today I'm going to introduce Bernice. And just a quick story about Bernice is that some time ago, it's probably, I don't know, been well over a year, I was kind of rummaging through my stuff in my basement. And lo and behold, I found my my old Tier 2 certificates of completion. My graduation from Tier 2 was in a bottom drawer somewhere in pretty good shape. And so I kind of laughed about it, and it helped me reminisce, you know, I'm thinking, man, how far have I gone? Who would have known, right? Who would have known? So I brought him into work, and then Bernice was kind of looking at him, and she was looking at the handwriting on the envelope, right, Bernice? And it was her handwriting. So think about this. This was well over 20 some years ago that I received these. And Bernice had handwritten the address to me in prison in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan as a volunteer with Crossroads. And so we connect, and so here we are now working together. She's now an employee and I'm an employee. So it's just kind of a neat story. So why don't you go ahead, Bernice?
Thanks, Doug. I like to tell people I started at Crossroads when I was 5 years old. Not sure if you'll believe that or not, but hard to believe that it's been that long. So I work in the operations department, as Doug said, and we handle a lot of the process of overseeing the lessons, getting the lessons from the students to you. We mark the lessons received in the computers, we mark them forwarded to you, we send Bibles to students every week, variety of other tasks that we do that also assist other departments here at Crossroads, help out with mailings and different things like that. So it's a good variety in operations. So, give you kind of a big picture view. Before COVID hit, so say January, February this year, we had a really good number of mission support volunteers that would come into the office and do a lot of the work. I know at least one of those is on this call today. Hi, Bob. And we did not have a single operations department volunteer working at home. Then COVID. And so as of March 19, we started with one operations volunteer working from his home. And at last count, last week or early this week, we were all the way up to 29 mission support volunteers working from home on things in the operations department. So it's been something that we have increased the number slowly and gradually as we saw a need for more people to do more tasks. Then we would ask a volunteer if they'd be interested in working from home with us. So it's really been a blessing, and I'm really thankful for how well it has gone overall. So that's been one of the biggest changes that we have noticed in the building here since COVID first hit. Another change that started was right after the coronavirus first appeared in Michigan and affected us. We stopped sending the spread the word enrollment form to students with their new lessons because for the first couple weeks, we weren't able to process enrollment forms that we were getting from prospective students. And so we didn't want to be sending students this enrollment form saying, hey, ask your friends to sign up with us. But yet the enrollment forms were just kind of piling up here in the office. I'm happy to say that after a couple weeks, we were able to resume processing the enrollment forms that we received. And now, you know, for the last couple months now, we've been on a very good routine of getting those enrollment forms processed in a timely manner on a regular basis. So just last week, we restarted sending the Spread the Word enrollment forms to English-speaking students with their new lessons. As mentors, you won't see those unless you have a Tier 3 student, because for Tier 1 and Tier 2 students, we send those with a new lesson, not with the completed lessons that you see. And then this week, we just started sending the Spread the Word enrollment forms to the Spanish-speaking students again as well for a while. So that's progress. So that's a good thing. Mail volume has been down the last couple weeks. I'm sure many of you have heard about the problems and issues that the United States Postal Service is having. And yes, that is affecting Crossroads a little bit. We've noticed that our mail volume just is not as much as it was even earlier on during the pandemic, but we're making use of the time. On days when we don't get quite as much mail, then we get some work done on other projects that we've been kind of putting on the back burner for a little bit. In fact, that's what some of my team is doing right now, is working on one of those projects. So that remains to be seen, but it's obviously a matter of prayer that we pray that the post office gets their issues taken care of and that we can get our mail in a timely manner so we can keep serving the students well. Another thing that COVID has changed is the journey of a lesson. You know, sometimes we get questions about where does a lesson go? Where all does it stop? What happens to the lesson from when it gets to from the student to you, the mentor? Well, I can explain that to you in 6 easy steps here. So step 1, the student completes the lesson and mails it to the office. So lesson arrives in our office. And then step 2 is we take that lesson and we send it to a volunteer working at home, and they scan through it and flag for us anything that we need to take care of in the office before we would send that lesson to you, the mentor. So if the student's asking for a Bible, if the student is asking for a progress letter for their judge or parole board, things like that, the volunteer will kind of put those on the outside of the lesson so that we can take care of that before that lesson gets to you. So then that lesson is brought back to our office, and then we send it to a different volunteer at home who marks it received in the computer system. Sometimes that happens in the office here with some of our staff, but quite often it's volunteers at home now doing that. And the neat thing about that is about 1.5 years ago, we launched our new computer system. And I was thinking back, if we would have still had our old computer system when the pandemic started, I really don't think that Crossroads would have been able to continue our ministry during this time, because we just would not have been able to have so many staff working from home, certainly would not have been able to have volunteers working from home on the computer. But because our computer system now is based in the cloud, all anybody needs is a computer, internet access, and then of course the username and password, and then they can work from home on the computer. So that's really an example of God's faithfulness in how he was preparing us as a ministry ahead of time for the pandemic he knew was coming, that we had no idea that this pandemic was coming. But God was still leading us and guiding us and preparing us for this time. So very, very thankful for that. So once the lesson is marked received in the computer, then the volunteer brings it back to the office. And then every week on Monday, I run a report in which the computer randomly assigns Tier 1 lessons to Tier 1 mentors. And then that's also when we print the envelopes for all the lessons, Tier 1 and Tier 2 and 3. You know, we print the envelope with your name and address on it, and then we print the envelope with the student name and address on it. So we get all those printed, and then guess what? We send those to another volunteer at home so that they can put them all together. So they put the right lessons in the right student envelopes in the right mentor envelope. And then when they're done with that, they send everything, bring everything back to us. We seal it up and get it sent out in the mail. So the last step is sending the new lesson to the student. When we mark a lesson received in the computer, that triggers the next lesson in that course to be sent to the student. So one of the things that I do is every morning when I get to work, I run a report that gives us a list of all the students that need a new lesson sent to them. So it might have 20 students who need new lesson 2 of Great Truths of the Bible, and there might be 10 students that need lesson 8 of It All Belongs to God, you know, all of our lessons. So I run that report, I print those envelopes, and then one of our staff members here combines those envelopes in a pile with the correct lesson number, puts it all in a mail bin or two, and then we send that to another volunteer's home so that she can write that lesson ID number on the back of the lesson, puts the postage paid business reply envelope in there with the spread the word, and then brings it all back to us the next day. We seal it up and drop it in the mail. So in total, there could be 4 different homes of different volunteers that one single lesson is in. It sounds like it's a cumbersome, time-consuming process, but it really works really smoothly. And when we were in the time when we couldn't have any volunteers in the building, this is how we kept going. We are blessed now. We're at the point where we can have 2 mission support volunteers per day in the operations department here in the building. So we've got a couple people, and once things change in the pandemic in the state of Michigan here, then there's a plan in place to bring back a few more volunteers. So we're eagerly looking forward to bringing back more people in the building. Last thing I want to share is a couple statistics that I track. I have some stats that I share with our staff members every week. And the most interesting one, I think, is the number of lessons that we have forwarded to you, the mentors, during this year. You can see on this chart here, it shows the number of lessons that we have forwarded to mentors each week. Varies a little, and that's to be expected. You know, people go on vacation, people need a break from lessons for a while, new mentors start, variety of factors. A really encouraging number for me is this one. During the pandemic, between March 16 and July 31, we forwarded 45,087 lessons to you mentors. Now, keep in mind that during that time, in jails and prisons in our country, there was almost no chapel services, Bible studies, anything like that, because no volunteers were allowed in. And in most states in the country, we're still not allowed in yet. So during that time, when people in prison cannot get visits from family, because there's no visitation, almost no or no Bible studies or chapel services, but they still receive the letters from you, the mentors. And that is just a testimony to God's faithfulness in provision to encourage our students and keep them built up in their faith. So consider that a pat on the back, because that's really an awesome number. Another thing I track every week is how many lessons that we mark received in the computer each week. So on this chart, you'll see the number of Tier 1 English lessons that we've received every week so far since March 23. You notice I talked about the mail volume fluctuating. That explains a lot of the ups and downs in these numbers. That really low week of June 29, that's because that was the week of 4th of July, so the office was closed for a few days, couple days for the holiday. But that gives you an idea of about how many lessons go through the office in a week. A smaller number is the number of Spanish lessons that we process each week. We have a high majority of our students are English speaking, but we do have a Spanish program. And as you can see, the numbers are significantly lower. But I'm happy to say that, you know, with the exception of the first 1 or 2 weeks during the pandemic, every week we've been able to mark received in the computer all the lessons that came into the office that week. So again, that's a testament to God's faithfulness and our wonderful team of staff and volunteers. We have one volunteer who used to come in the office and now works at home, and he reviews all those Spanish lessons every week and prepares them for us to receive them in the computer. So that is kind of a snapshot of the operations department. Doug, is there anything you can think of that I should have mentioned at this point? I know we have a Q&A coming up. You're muted.
You'd think I'd get used to that. We can save it. Yeah, there's. I think you hit a lot of the top points for everybody. Always an interest. You know, last night I hadn't really put it all into context. So we made it simple for me with the 6 steps, but I just didn't. It didn't click with me that those lessons had actually been in 4 people's homes before we were able to get it to wherever it needed to go. That is just unbelievable. So great job with that. That's awesome. So, well, thank you. So why don't we finish up? I have a few things and then we'll open it up. And so as I do on most all of these calls, I just want to encourage you to think about who in your network, who in your friend group, your life groups, church group, adult Sunday school group, that would potentially be interested in hearing about why they should serve the prisoner. Why is it important for the church to reach the prisoner? I would love to join you in a conversation on that through Zoom, and then of course the how do we do that, and that's through Crossroads. So that's an open invitation if you would like to do that, at least even have that discussion. You can contact me through mentor@cpministries.org, and I'm confident that Alicia will have that in the chat box. You know, during this time, it's difficult for us to gather as people to share that story, to grow the ministry when we're in a especially during this time, that how important it is to really think about and to actually grow the ministry at this time, because as Bernice said, there are many chapels that are not functioning inside the prison. Volunteers across the country, really across the world, are not able to come in and share the love and hope of Jesus Christ. And so the one avenue that has been left open is for you and I and us as Crossroads to go inside and visit the prisoner through the way that we do that. I was going to talk a little bit about these mentor gatherings. You know, these community gatherings. You know, when we started doing those, it was just a thought. Let's see what happens, and they've just been wonderful to do it. Great to get to talk to you guys, to grow a sense of community, a sense of oneness together, because you know we have about 3,200 mentors, and they're dispersed across the country, and so it's really hard for us all to gather in one area, but through technology we can do that. And, you know, it's really, I was just talking to somebody before I got on here. I said, this is my favorite part of the week, is to come gather with the mentors. And so very thankful for that, because, you know, before COVID, one of my regular routines was to go travel and go to you. I would go to churches, go to different organizations to present the ministry. And that's been cut off. So we've been doing it through Zoom. And when we do these gatherings, it's been really good. And so when we look ahead at these gatherings, we were thinking about, okay, what's next? We've gone through, we've really, you know, tried to help you understand the ministry better. And so we've gone through the whole office. So we would like to focus on how can we better equip you to do what you do? How can we better empower you to serve and visit the prisoner as you do? And so next month we will be doing a letter writing workshop. And from there, or even now, what I would like to hear from you is, what would you like to hear? How can we better equip you through this venue? How can we better empower you through this venue? Is there something that you would like to hear about? Would you like to learn about? Would you like to have the discussion about? Is it something like you'd like to hear more about? What does the prison environment look like in more detail? You know, who are we serving in more detail? What is reentry? I speak about reentry on occasion. Well, what does that really mean? What does reentry mean? And because we have to remember in that particular subject that 96% of those that we incarcerate will be returning back to our community. And so what does that mean for us as the church? So I'd really like to hear from you. You can go ahead and email me on that mentor email, and that'll get to me, and we'll go from there. So thank you. I thank you in advance for considering that. And so we're going to end now, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. But I want to end in the spirit of the Just for Mentors. So I wanted to talk today about restoration. So why don't you pull up that slide, Alicia? And I jotted down some notes to keep me on track. And of course, when I'm speaking about this, as I often do when I talk about the prisoner, I'm often generalizing. But when we look at those we sentence and then incarcerate, those that have caused us harm, we have to remember they're incarcerated because in some way they have caused harm to another person or the community, and that we no longer consider them part of our community. They are pulled out, they're literally pulled out and taken away. They are cast out of our communities, and the not welcome sign goes on our door. Often they are looked at as unredeemable. This message is made clear to those that serve their time and continues when they are released and returned to our communities. Because really, as I was alluding to prior to this, the beginning of the program, they're serving a life sentence. It's an unspoken life sentence. Their conviction never, ever goes away. My conviction will never go away. And we must contend with it for the rest of our lives. And the sad and interesting fact is that there are over 40,000, it's 40,000 collateral consequences that come with a felony conviction, affecting all aspects of one's life. Yet when we look at the Bible, we see a story of restoration that rises above what society may want to tell us. We see the story of Israel and Judea. We see the story of King David and of Paul. A story that through Jesus, we can be washed clean and made whole. So your tip as you write your student is talk about what restoration may mean to you. Share with your student that that we all can be restored, despite what all of us, what we may have done, our circumstances, or what others may be telling us. Tell them, and you can literally tell them that they are not an outcast. Share that they are or can be part of a community of believers called the church. And this tip was driven by Jeremiah 30, verse 17. But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord, because you are called an outcast, Zion, for whom no one cares. And in closing, I think about, what does God think about? What does he see through his eyes for those that have caused harm and that we have cast aside? So thank you for coming today. If you want to pull that screen down, thank you for listening. It was great. And we'll just open it up for questions and answers, and we'll finish that way.
Doug, we had a really great question in the chat asking about examples of collateral consequences. What are those?
Oh, there are 44,000 of them, and I can speak about some of the most obvious ones. So a consequence would be that here's a good one. In Michigan, here's a simple one you wouldn't think about. So in prison, you know, many of our prisons, you probably wouldn't think about this, are really not, really it's the staff really oversees the prisoners. They really oversee them, keep them safe, keep the community safe, keep each other safe. But really a prison is basically a small community, very similar to the community that we live in, where the prisoners actually work. So they have kitchen workers, and they have people that shovel the snow and mow the lawn and do all the details inside the prison, you know, mop and just all the labor that needs done. But one of them is also is a barber. So they're a barber. And that's kind of a coveted job within the prison because it's just a good job. Anyway, so someone has honed their barber skills for many years and are very good at it. When they get out of prison, they are not allowed to be licensed by the state to be a barber. That's a collateral consequence. Many housing complexes. So if someone's looking for a home to live, you know, they put that they're a felon on there. The rules are Section 8 housing does not allow certain felonies to come into, you know, to have Section 8 housing. Many housing complexes do not allow people with felonies to have a job. Many licensures, like I said, with the barber shop or the barber issue, you just cannot get a state license to practice a profession. You know, and I could go on, but there are just tons of them. If I went out to apply for a job, many of those are limited. I'm a registered nurse. If I wanted to go to nursing school, that's automatically closed. You know, I just wouldn't be allowed into nursing school. So the list just goes on and on and on, and it affects every area and every factor of one's life. And that's one of the challenges of reentry is that, well, sadly, when I go into the prison, in one of the prisons that I was going into before it closed, was all of the people that were in there would be leaving at some time. And so a number of them were on, you know, getting close to their sentence being done. And I would bring up some of these difficulties because they hadn't been thinking about that. They just wanted to get out of prison. And I sometimes would articulate that once you get out of prison, that really that's just the first part of your sentence. You have this unspoken second part of your sentence, which in many respects is much longer than the actual prison time.
Thanks, Doug. We've got a hand raised from Gina. Gina, I apologize for the game of mute and unmute. You just had some background noises that was getting picked up. So you are welcome to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I was a female inmate myself in 1988, and I was just wondering if you have any female inmates that participate also in a lesson with Crossroads. And I know, of course, there's many higher percentage of male inmates than female inmates. And I was just wondering, do you ever get them from time to time and have mentors like myself or any of us mentors do their lessons?
So I was trying to follow what you were asking. So are you saying that, well, I can hit on part of it, and if I don't answer it, re-ask it. So for statistically, there are 9 men incarcerated to 1 female. 9 men to 1 female. I often make a sad joke is that's because us guys, we always cause havoc in people's lives. But I think, Bernice, correct me if I'm wrong, if you could. I think our ratio is pretty close to that here at Crossroads too, is it not? It's about, it mirrors the incarcerated population. Yeah, which is good. I think what you're asking is that do we allow male mentors to mentor female mentors? Is that type of thing? Cross-sex? Am I right on that? In tier one, we do not have the capacity because we actually have more female mentors than male mentors, and we have more male students than we have female students. So in tier one, it would be impossible for us to do the connection with male and male and female and female. We just would not be able to do that. The numbers wouldn't work, and it would be very awkward to do that. In tier two, when you do one-on-one mentoring, normally what you would get is you would get assigned the next person that's coming in that needs to have a mentor. So the next student that came in and said, I'm ready to do the next tier, we would then assign that, and we would sometimes assign a male to a female and vice versa. Now, if you are uncomfortable with that, we do have the capacity to connect 2 male or
that's
2
not what I'm
females.
asking.
Yeah, we do have that capability if that is something you're really firm in your belief in doing. So I hope that answers your question.
No, Doug.
Okay.
No, Doug. I was asking. You misunderstood me. What I'm asking is, can you mail me lessons from female inmates and male inmates? I don't want to be, like connected. Like I just want a female inmate to do their lessons. My question was, do you do a variety of, can send me female and male lessons to the house instead of just male? That was my question.
Oh, I think I'm following you now, and you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, you seem like you are getting more male students than you are female. You aren't seeing any females. Well, that is not on purpose. I would think that would just be a mathematical random thing, that because we have 9 male students to every 1 female students, just mathematically that could go on for a while, and then here comes a female because it's randomized.
Doug, that's exactly right how the process works, because when we are forwarding lessons to mentors, the computer takes the lesson that's been received in the office the longest amount of time, and the computer just connects that lesson with the next mentor in line to get a tier 1 lesson. And then it just keeps going down the line like that.
Yeah.
So it is just completely random what gender a tier 1 mentor will get each week.
Good.
Do we have any other questions? I haven't seen anything else come up yet in the chat.
Paula added a few more consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Voting rights, some states, that's true. Some states, our voting rights are taken from you. They're just, Florida right now, they passed a law that the people actually passed a law that said, yes, they can get their voting rights, except for a subset group of sex offenders and murderers. I don't know why they pulled those 2 out. But even then, they did not get their voting rights restored because the legislature decided that, well, if they didn't pay their fines or their fees, then they can't vote. And so it's just a mess, and it's going through the courts right now. But there's a word for that that's called disenfranchising. And there are a number of states. Michigan is different. Michigan, the day you step out of prison, you have your voting rights restored, which is good.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for addressing the topic of letter writing, because I struggle when there is not much coming from the student in the comments or prayer requests or about their life, when they just answer the questions. And so I frequently, because it's hard to write a letter to somebody that you don't know, and I appreciate that topic being covered and the tips that you give us. And then if I could really quick just tell you a heartwarming story. I have a little gal that I've remained in contact with, that I ministered to from the Department of Youth Corrections. For 6 years we've been friends, and she now has her own family. She's got toddlers at home, and in their apartment complex they had people stealing packages. And he got his package stolen, the little 4-year-old, the kids, that came from the grandmother, and it had his fighter is what he called it, little outfit in it. And they found out who was doing it. It was the neighbor beneath them that was doing it with his son. And they went to jail, they got out, and Jace is the little boy's name, that's 4. And he said, "Mommy, I know why they are stealing the packages." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because they're sad that they don't have packages." He said, "I'm going to make them a package." And he wants to make them a package, and he's putting in the package his beloved little Spider-Man something or other, and they're going to deliver them a package. And I just think, that could be life-changing for that man. I mean, hopefully it will affect him in some way, but what a beautiful child's heart to reach out. What made me think of that, Doug, is when you shared that inmates are frequently, they're outcasts. They're removed from society, and they're treated as such. So I think if when we're in society, we can treat them differently, like just a simple example of that, letting a child do what's in their heart to give these people a package. And he's going to explain to them why he's going to give him the package. But that's what it made me think of that heartwarming story.
It brings to mind, wouldn't the world be different if many of us looked at the world through a child's eyes?
Yes.
The world looked different. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Jody. We did get a question in the chat from Jim, and he's asking, what is the rate of completion for Tier 1 students? And I know we had a similar question last night, Bernice.
I know Bernice has a great answer for
yeah.
Yes, that is one of the things that we are definitely planning on digging into this year in our ministry year, and pulling that information from the computer system. In prior years, with the old computer system, we just did not have the capability of finding those numbers, but our new computer system does have, much more capability. And so I can look on my computer here real quick. Alicia, could you tell me what that question was again, one more time?
We're looking at the number of students for Tier 1 completion.
Okay.
Maybe we can compare numbers of Way 1 and Way 3, or Survey of the Bible 14.
Okay, well, our ministry year just ended June 30, and I can tell you how many students completed the Who Are You course, and how many completed Great Truths of the Bible, and how many completed Survey of the Bible. Completed Who Are You, we had 10,675 students complete that course in the last ministry year. In that same time, we had 1,816 students complete Great Truths of the Bible. And then we had 570 students complete Survey of the Bible in the last ministry year. So obviously you can see the drop off in the numbers. Who Are You has a whole lot more graduates than Survey of the Bible at this point. And I was just speaking with another staff member earlier today in a meeting about how we want to start looking at where in the process students are dropping off at, and if we can tell why. But we are planning on digging into that in these next 12 months or so.
And do you happen to have the numbers, those same numbers for tier 3? How many go on to?
Yes. So in our ministry year that just ended June 30, I'll give you the numbers of the students that completed the tier 3 courses. The first course is biblical interpretation. 25 students completed that course. And the next course is biblical truth in depth. 32 students completed that course. Third course is Christian Worldview 1, and we had 33 students finish that one. And then the last course is Christian Worldview 2. We had 20 students complete that one. So obviously the numbers get smaller as time goes on. That's quite an accomplishment for students to do a tier 3 course and complete it, because it's very in-depth material. So that's a wonderful accomplishment for each one.
Thanks for pulling that up, Bernice. It's really nice to have a very quick system online where we can just go click a few buttons and get the data that we want.
We'll invite you to one of these.
Yeah. Walter, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Regarding letter writing, I find myself writing, actually most times 2, 3, or 4 pages of text. For me, it's easy. I like to write, and I just carry over from college because I wrote so much, but I find it easy to write letters and actually discuss with my students easily. My question is there, you only send me 1 page of crossroads paper, and I copy some stationery on my computer, and I write 3 pages back to back. So it would be actually sometimes my last year I wrote up to 6 pages, but I try to cover in depth everything very well so the student knows exactly what I'm thinking. I know what they're thinking. And oftentimes the student brings up issues that aren't related to the lesson. Such as the last student wrote to me that he tried to commit suicide several times, and what could I do about that? And I find myself trying to answer that, and in short, my answer to the student is that they need to get help from somebody, the chaplain, a guard perhaps, or perhaps the prison doctor, or perhaps the doctor can get them professional help where they can get diagnosed for the problem. But my question is there a limit how many pages I can write or not? Okay, is it okay that I write that much for them and they like to read it?
No, there's no limit on the number of pages that you write, as long as they wouldn't get lost in it.
Yeah,
you know, as long as they don't get lost.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I include everything in the envelope, but I make sure it all fits very well, and it all fits well. But I write I describe. I'm not actually. I write poetry quite a bit too.
Mm.
That's where I get my writing ease from, and I wrote right to the students, and I find it easy that they have cues and things that they say in their lessons regarding what they're thinking, what they want to talk about in the letter, and that's how I formulate what I talk to them about my letters. But our last 4 students, it was like 6 pages that I sent back to them. It takes time, but I think that my time invested in them is well worth my effort to try to help them and where they're at, because I feel that it's God's wanting me to write to these students in the best efficient manner I can to my best ability to answer all the questions that they have, and I do it right from my heart.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and when we think about how much should we be writing, and we don't dictate that at all.
Okay.
But except for we ask for that the minimum.
Definitely do that.
Yeah, the minimum would be a full page of an encouraging letter.
Okay, it is very encouraging. Yes. Encouraging
letter, and also to make sure that when you're doing your lessons that you acknowledge that you're reading it.
Oh, definitely.
By putting comments right into the lesson.
I do that too. Yes, yep. I do that, Doug. Yeah.
But I just also want to encourage you, and I want to encourage all of you when it comes to your letters, is that here in Michigan, and it's probably very similar across our country, is that 80% of our prisoners do not receive any correspondence or communication outside of the prison walls in any given month. So you think about that number is just so sad, really, that they aren't getting any correspondence, nobody's writing them, and they have nobody to call. And so that letter, that lesson and that letter may be the only communication outside the prison walls with somebody from the community that they receive in any given month. I mean, it's hard, sometimes hard. I understand it because I lived it, but I also it's hard for me to really wrap my head around that. And just think, and that's why it's one of my passion, because honestly, the loneliness within prison is just awful. And despite the chaos that's always going, all the noise and all the crowdedness, it is still can be a tremendously lonely place. And so that letter, those words of encouragement, those letters of hope, maybe a piece of your story, just can mean so much to those that you are writing. So I just want to thank you and thank you and thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome, Rick. Very welcome. Like I said before, I've had letters that talk about their drug addiction, their alcohol addiction, and it doesn't have any relation to the lesson at hand, but in a roundabout way, it kind of does. And I have to talk about these issues in my letters. That's why they're so long. And those issues are so complex, you just can't use simple answers, yes, no, this or that. You got to answer completely and in-depth answers, and it takes time to do that. And I try to answer them.
Good, thanks, Walter.
Okay, you're very welcome, Doug.
We have had a few questions come up through the chat now, and we're going to start with Suzette's question, and then Gina, I see that your hand is raised, so we'll ask your question after Suzette's question. But Suzette's question is, how do we respond to a student who seems to be clinically depressed?
Yeah, and you will see that. Yeah, that's clinically depressed, and we see one of the questions last night was about mental illness, and how do you handle that? And the best way, because we're not there with them, the best, in my opinion, this is my opinion, the best way that we can do that is to encourage them. Encourage them. Tell them that you care for them. Tell them God cares for them. That if they are deeply depressed where it's causing you concern for their well-being, that encourage them to seek help within their facility. Even though they may tell you that they don't trust any staff members, which is, I get it. They just don't trust, they don't trust the system. And, but that's where they live, and they just have to reach out by faith. If you're really concerned, that they reach out by faith for help from within the care system that are inside the prison. Most prisons have some type of care that comes in, whether it's contracted nurses or doctors. They have psychs, they have psychologists that come in. And so there typically is, if they ask for it, it may not come immediately, but they can get help if they really need it. But I also understand their reservations in reaching out to others to tell them that they're in trouble. And so you have to kind of walk through that. And so just encourage them to step out in faith if that's how far they've gone into their depression.
Thanks, Doug. Gina, do you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself. I don't have that power anymore. There we go.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I was just making a comment that I wanted to share. It was a testimony that the lady had shared earlier, and it really touched my heart because it was awesome about that little boy. And I just want to share, my son has been in the system, in prison and jail all his life, unfortunately. And the last time he went to prison here in Florida, he became a friend with a gentleman that was in there, has a life sentence. And he asked about me being his pen pal, and we started talking. And I've been writing him for 3 years now, back and forth and that. And just recently, I sent him a tract about salvation, accept Jesus as a Savior. And he wrote me back, and all I just did was could cry. It touched my heart. He said that he got on his knees and wept and asked Jesus into his heart and asked him to come into his life as his personal Savior. And that was just awesome. And I just wanted to share that because it did have an impact on his life, and just us being mentors, that our words and that, and just encouraging inmates and being there for them. And like I said, a lot of them don't have anyone. Their families maybe have pushed them aside or don't want to talk to them or whatever. So they need us. They need that encouragement from us. So I just want to share that and give encouragement to all the mentors that our words are not in vain, and it does make a difference in an inmate's life, these letters and these lessons.
Thanks for sharing, Gina. Yes, the power that the relationships that we have, even with just letter writing, is often more than we can ever imagine. So thank you for sharing. I had a conversation in the chat with Jonelle, and we were talking about how all students start with our Who Are You course, and then they all follow the same order of courses throughout. She made a comment that the ones who've completed Tier 3 have completed many lessons. And I just confirmed with another staff that it's about 130 lessons in total when they go through our entire program. So it is quite the accomplishment for a student to make it all the way through. It also means that they are likely in a facility for a very long time. So we're also very glad to have that many lessons, that we can have a relationship with them for that long. So, and then a follow-up question came out of that from Nancy, who asked about mentors. Does Tier 3 require a college degree for mentors?
Does Tier 3? No, it does not. We used to have certain criteria. We do not require a theology degree or any of that type of thing. So for example, if you are traveling with you've traveled with your Tier 2 student for, however long you did, for really quite a long time. At that time, you can, if the student wants to continue on to Tier 3, you would recommend that person for Tier 3. You have the opportunity to consider mentoring with him in Tier 3. If you have any reservations about that or want to know more about that, we'd be certainly willing to take that call to talk through that. But really, for Tier 3 mentors, really, I often think you have to have a passion for the Bible, passion for digging deep into the Bible, and also to know that these lessons take longer than a Tier 1 or Tier 2, because you're digging into hermeneutics, apologetics, so that the difficulty level goes up. But I also have heard from mentors about how much better they have learned the Bible at a much different level, having journeyed with a student through Tier 3.
Thanks, Doug. We also had another question from Walker Guest. I don't know your proper name, but I'll call you Walker Guest because that's your screen name. And this person asks if it's okay to write about things like what's in the garden and every other kind of day life.
It's in the garden. He hits right into Alicia is a gardener.
Yeah.
You know, I've written about this a number of times, and you know, I'll give you a longer answer to a short question. You know, when you're incarcerated, it's amazing how quickly you lose track of being part of the greater community outside prison walls. And, you know, you're stuck behind a fence, you're stuck in some prisons and jails, especially our community jails. Many prisoners don't even go outside. They get just short breaks outside of their cell, but they don't even have an opportunity. If they're lucky, they get to go out for half an hour outside for a day. Many prisons have, you know, some of our older prisons have literal walls around them where they can't see the outside community, so they only see what's in front of them inside the prison. So what happens is that their world becomes very small and very isolated. And I have not, so here's the direct answer. I have not met a prisoner, and I have met many prisoners in my life, that would not desire to hear about the smaller things in the world outside of the fence that they live with. So whether it's about your gardening, whether it's about the weather, whether it's about you know, a trip and what you saw, you know, the trees that you saw, the mountains that you saw, and what it meant to you. There's no reason at all to even think that you don't want to, you know, make them feel sorry, you know, what they've done. They want to hear some of those smaller things that is occurring outside of their prison walls, because quite frankly, all of them desire to be outside of those walls. And that's one way for them to have a glimpse of what is going on outside of their small, chaotic world.
Thanks, Doug. Gina, do you have another question? I think you've unmuted yourself. Maybe not. I might be seeing things. We are over our hour though. So Doug, do you want to close us out or ask for?
We'll take care of Kitty real quick because she was doing this.
Okay.
So. Oh.
Maybe not.
Kitty, you're still muted.
Yep.
Mute.
There we go.
How's that? Okay. Because I'm a biblical counselor, I just wanted to give you a little bit extra regarding the person that's depressed. One of the things, obviously, professional counseling is good, but one of the things they can do in the meantime is to turn away from being inverted on themselves and be extroverted. In other words, tell them to start praying for someone else and quit thinking about their problems. Give the problems to the Lord, pray for other people. Also in Ephesians, I think it's 3, it might be 4, there is something that Paul talks about called putting off and putting on, so that when we change habits, we have to put off the old habit and replace it with putting on a new habit. So in the way of depression, one of the things is put off thinking about yourself and put on praying for others. Or, you know, he uses the things like put off not working and put off work and put on working. So it's, you know, that was just a couple of things I thought maybe people could, the other mentors can have.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kitty.
Mm.
Well, as Alicia alluded to, we are past our hour, and we want to honor your time. Of course, I could stay here another hour. So what we will do is we'll close out. So I just want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your time. And, you know, so many in this world do not give who you serve a thought. Yet, here you are today. So, I just thanks for that. It's just awesome. So again, if you have some ideas on some topics that you would like to explore, we would love to hear that. And I wish you a good day and a good week. And we will stay on until everybody's gone. If you have a last minute question or a thought, we would stay on and just chat with you for a little while. So, and if you want to join me at the mistake we made at 8 o'clock, I'll be there at 8 o'clock tonight. So thank you again for coming.